Hello, everyone, and welcome. Before we start, let me do an introduction. For those who don't know me, my name is Antipotion. I'm a self-taught product engineer who builds products, tools, and systems that solve real-world problems. In these live streams, you'll see me work through the entire product development process, from exploring ideas and designing solutions to implementing features and refining the user experience. Along the way, I'll share the constraints, trade-offs, and reasoning behind the decisions that shape the final product. The goal isn't just to build software, it's to make the thinking behind the software visible. I'm also building a community on Discord where I share development blogs, roadmaps, project updates, and behind-the-scenes progress. If you're interested, or if you just like to hang out and talk with other builders, you'll find the Discord link in the bottom left corner of the screen and in the description. Thanks for being here, and let's get started. For today's stream's objective, we have the following. Explain the workaround for the layout constraint problem that we encountered last livestream, and continue implementing our UI design from Figma. So let's look at an illustration of the problem that we just encountered in our previous live stream. So we have a design in our UI, which is this one. We have a screen here, which is a mobile screen, right? And then we have a parent container, like so, that occupies the full width of the screen. Then we have the container of our what do you call this? This one, let me show it. This one here. This one, inside the task board, there are baskets or categories that should scroll left and right. However, we encountered a problem there where the layout breaks. It doesn't conform to the assumptions that I have in my head. So let's say that these are the elements. Alright, these are the categories that we have, and they are the children of this container, right? Suppose that's the case. And then this container here, this one at the back, what I expected for it to do is instead to house this elements inside it, right? Let's call this element container, just so we're clear. This is a parent container. This one here. What I expected for the element container to do is to follow the full width of the parent, right? However, what happened instead was that the element container occupied the whole width of these elements, and so the parent container as well occupied it. Now we have an overflow for all the elements inside this screen, which I don't want to happen, because the intended design was for these to house the elements, and this to just stay as it is, right? And so in these assumptions, this element, what I thought was for the full width of this element here to follow the full width of the parent. That was my assumption. However, what happened instead was that the element container instead, its full width, occupied the elements inside it. And so the parent container as well, being full width, received this information about the new layout of the element container and also expanded it itself to match it. Now, this problem can be solved by explicitly stating the max size of the element container, this one here. So I did that. Alright, I also tried it. Let me copy it and make a copy for it. I did this. I gave it a max. That is the width of the screen, right? However, another problem occurred because this one here didn't it followed the view width of the screen, right? So let's say if the screen is 320 pixels, if that's the size of the screen, it followed it. However, when it followed it, the browser has its own, what do you call this? Has its own space intended for the scroll bar over here, like so. And so this one here instead overflowed to the left a little bit, like so, because now this element here, element container, is now occupying the full width of the screen, right? The max viewport width. And then the parent container is a full width, so it receives the information that the element container is now this width. So it also expanded to be full width of the whole document. And so this problem here, I just cannot make it so that I encode a hard number here. Let's say 320 pixels. I can't just do this right here because this 320 pixels will then be false if the screen, let's say, becomes 720 pixels, and now the hard-coded value won't grow to accommodate this size here. So instead, the workaround that I did, since I still want a relative unit and not hard code a absolute unit here, I instead did this. I made the element container occupy its max width for 90 view width. Now you might ask, why is it 90? So I did some testing from 90, 91, 92, and so on. And I found out that from 90 to 91, there would be a small overflow that will occur on the screen. So instead, I made it 90 view width. So now, since it is a 90 view width here, 90 viewport width, there are spaces, right? Because it only occupies 10% less of the total viewport width. So now this element container has space. So what I did instead, to make it look a bit much more polished, is I made a group inside this. Let's say this one here. let's this one here, this element container, I made it so that let's make this like that, and this one another color here, let's say this one. I made it inside another parent container, and this container here is now a flexbox. This is a flexbox. This is also a flexbox here, and this one here, the one holding these elements here, is also a flexbox, right? And then since this is left aligned and there is a small space here that isn't occupied, what I did instead is I center this. I said self-center. Now even if there is a space in, so now it moves to the center, right? And also it housed this, what do you call this, this elements here, because now this group of elements will now overflow, because this element container here now has an explicit max value of 90 viewport width. So that's the workaround that I did for this layout here. Let me show you again the layout. For this layout here, inside this task board over here, so I can show you the, how do you call this, the effects, but before that, let's fix some issues, because I worked on some places of this how do you call this, of this code space here. I made a bit of changes, but it's all over the place just to accommodate the new design here, and some cleanup of old code that no longer enforces the invariants that we have, whose assumptions has been broken, right? So now let's fix first these errors that we received here. Task dashboard. So in here, as you can notice, this status here have all been errored now, right? Because in the task facade here, oh, by the way, if you are wondering why we have this specific structure in coding, or the why did I make it so that it is very specific, let me show you quick. Let me show you a quick screen here. Let me find it first. Thanks all. So as you can see here in the architectural visualization, this is the intended structure of the project before it was started, and how the code was written, how it is enforced, and how the code base is structured. So we have here the infrastructure, right? This this inside of the infrastructure, everything that belongs here are code that calls on the external API. Anything external, for example, a cloud database or a local database or browser APIs like local storage, things like that. And then this infrastructure here communicates to the use case and the store only. So only the use case and the store has access to this infrastructure codes. The use case is responsible for the domain rules, for the business rules. This enforces all the invariants. For example, if you send a review or if you add a task, the use case enforces all the invariants that is required before it is sent to the database to be recorded. The store here beside it stores all the data that is read and written. The store gets the information from the infrastructure, and everything here, including the use case, the facade, communicates to the store if they need data, because only the store is responsible for information, for states, for anything that requires access to data. And here in the facade, we have a simplified API version that is consumable by the UI components. So the use case here and the store the facade has access to both the use case and the store. This simplifies the API for both of this so that it is easily consumable by the component here. This component here refers to the UI, the one the user interacts with. Anything that is front-facing should only talk to the facade here. And the facade is responsible for coordinating the use case, the store, for the information needed by the component. Any component should only talk to the facade here. So that's how the code base is structured. That's how the responsibility is divided. And that's also how, when you notice me coding, I don't quite look on the project tree, because this mental model is what I follow. If I need information, if I need data, I know I'll get it from the store. If I need to send information to the infrastructure, or if I need to do something related to external API, I know that I'll have to deal with use cases. And if I have to put data in front of the UI, then it's the responsibility of the facade. And if I need to connect external things, I need to connect external dependencies to the code base, to the system, I know that I'll put it, or I'll find it inside the infrastructure here. So that's how the mental model is in this code base. It's how the architecture is decided to put boundaries of responsibility and for easy easy to remember or easy to navigate, just thinking about the capabilities that you need. So here is an example flow where a component has received a click event that sends submit. Then the submit here is sent to the facade, which communicates to the use case. The use case validates the workflow, which is then sent to the infrastructure if it's valid. And then the database is updated, which is then read by the store here, and then informs the facade that the data has been updated, which then the facade coordinates and tells the UI component that you should re-render because it has now been updated. So that's an example flow of the code base right here. Now let's proceed with fixing some errors that we have here, which I quite which I have quite a lot of, but they're not that they are not that, how do you call this, difficult. These are just assumptions breaking when I reinforced the invariant and made it much more explicit and refined, since we already have a definite UI that we can work with and most of the workflows has been established, the core workflows, which the app relies on or is the solution for the problem statement for TaskGate, which was to enforce explicit workflows and avoid ambiguous state transitions by necessitating that a submission can only be done if there is an output and a review that is held, right? So the first error here, we have the error inside the task dashboard HTML over here. This one, this status is here, as you can notice. This gets data from the task state, which is then in here, right? It's a computed signal that expects to receive an array of tasks here and a null. Now this one broke because the old code has this assumption that it's not here. Assumption that a task state is enforced. We have a model for that. However, I can't quite find it. It should be. Oh, it's here. It's above. So this is the task state model here. Before I change this code, this is the assumption. When reading a document, when waiting for the database to send the data, this is how the task state will be. First, it will be in a loading state, indicating that data is still being downloaded, or the database is still being contacted. And then if it receives a success response, it will be then transitioned to a success, and then it will have a data that contains the payload, which has the task array here, which is needed by this one to iterate over and show the different task list. Alright, and then if the contact and there is an error during that process, it will then be error state, which will have the error string here, and then this here will then show the error. Now, one reason why I broke this state machine here, this simple state transitions, is because I am also planning to generalize these transitions here instead of individually putting it on every calls or every, how do I say this, in every code of computed or signal from the observables. I will instead make a class for it to which you can call onto, and that class you will submit the code to be called, and then inside that class will have the transitions, this loading, success, and error, which you can then access by the state property inside that class. So that's the plan why I broke this code here. And so since we won't need these codes here for now, I'll just remove these things here, just like so, and then make this an if, and if no, we can then say that if state that length, we can actually rename this to task, tasks here because that's actually now what is being delivered. And then we have here the tasks. We no longer need this data here because the state machine is no longer present for now. So we fix one problem. Next, let's see. We have a task sort problem on this file here. It says that error occurs as a template component. Oh, another file code that depends on the assumptions that I just broke. So this is one advantage if you have a, how do I call this? If you have interfaces, types that is being enforced, because then if you change things, it's very easy to see which broke, right? Here I'll remove this for now since it's not being implemented, like so. And then make this task here. Oh, we don't need that anymore then. So that's that. Next. Was that everything? I was expecting for more. Yeah, that's everything that needs to be fixing. So I'll now show what happened to the one that I explained a while ago. This one's here. As you can see, they're now quite fixed, right? I also change it instead of scrolling left and right. I made it so it's just a grid, so it's easy to see and you don't have to, how do I call this? You don't need to discover anything. You just see it and then understand that okay, these are categories. But let me show you what I did. How the solution that I mentioned fix the problem that just occurred. Let me demonstrate first how the problem occurred, right? So let me make a copy of this and create another one here. Let me close this section here and comment them out. Nope. Let me comment this for now here. Like so. As you can see there, if I make this, let me remove this for now, and this code here too. No, actually we can just leave it at there. So what happened was that this here was flex, and this is a flex column. Oh no, it's just a flex there, and it contained those elements, right? And this one's here in the, how do I call this, in the this file here, taskboard card. This now has a, let me copy this one for now so that I don't break the existing code. This here has a dedicated, an explicit within height, right? So that they have some form there. So now, as you can see, this is what I meant by it, this scrolling behavior here. And if you make it, let's say it just, how do I say this, just if you say that, well, you can just make it flex 1, right? Make it the flex basis and the grow and shrink, as well as add a min width of 0, right, to shrink it. However, it doesn't work, and why that is the case is because the size of this one here is more than the parent, and the parent, as we can see here, no, not with, me, this is not showing the actual width here. Section, let's make it a div so it's easy to see. This one as well. Oops. Let's make this a div here. It's still not present. Oh. Let me check the, I can check the width here. However, it's not present. I don't know why is that. But anyways, this one here, as you can see, these elements here, since they have a width, this one here, since they have a width and height that is 24 rem, I guess, and then the total of that for every element inside, for every iteration of this code here, will be the total size of this container. And since this section here is affected by the overall global full width, then when this container informs, since on my research, the CSS layout algorithm depends on context and the intrinsic size of the elements to determine how the layouts should be. For instance, there are different rules for block elements, inline elements, flex, grid, and stuff. And so this intrinsic size here has changed, right? It's now the sum of these values here for every element in this iteration. And then this parent is full width, right? It has a width of 100%, and so that 100% instead occupies the width of this container here. The 100% was now based on this div element here of the container instead of the document of the screen, right? My assumption was that this here, the 100% of this section here, or the parent element, is based on its ancestor. However, what happened instead is that it inherits the width of the child, which then becomes its width because it's 100%. So now I did make this like so, flex, and then I placed in explicit width right? I place a screen to occupy the whole screen. Now, right, to limit it to only use the max viewport width here. And so as you notice, there is this a little jiggly overflow here because the browser still has to reserve space for the scroll bar gutter, and then this scroll bar gutter is then added to this viewport width. For instance, if the viewport is 320 pixels, this screen here, this 100 viewport width, now uses 320 pixels plus the gutter, or the reserved space for the scroll of the browser, which is why we can see this slight overflow here. And so instead of doing that, what I did instead is, as I mentioned on the illustration, that I limited to 90 viewport width. Now there is no, there is still some wiggly here. So let's reduce this for a bit. There is still this. Why is this happening here? Let me add some gap here just so I can. And also, let's add a background here so we can see what is happening. And it's clear. This here is the container for this one, which is wrong because this should be outside. And then we remove this for now. And then this one here, let's put a background here too so I can see it. PG purple. So that's the parent inherits the 89% viewport width. And this overflows, right? Now it overflows correctly. And then we say here, we say that it should overflow X to auto. So now it doesn't scroll left and right. The whole document is now occupying the appropriate screen width. And if we make this 90, yes, the 90 is here. It won't do a jiggly anymore. And then if we increase this by 1, notice that there is a slight overflow now, which is why I chose the 90 viewport width here. However, as you notice, this layout here isn't really intuitive, right? If you first view this screen and you don't know anything about the app, what would your immediate interpretation once you see these 3 boxes? You won't actually know that it is scrollable, right? I mean, just at first glance, you won't think immediately that there is more. What you'll notice instead is that there are 3 boxes, and maybe that's all, right? So that is why, even if this issue was fixed here, I didn't push that idea. Instead, I made it an explicit grid instead, which easily communicates to the viewers, no, not to the viewers, to the not the audience, to the users, that the available categories are everything that you see here, right? Let me put this back again to its intended. As you can see here, now when you see the task board, you immediately notice all the categories without really thinking, right? You just have to see it, and now you know that the task board has to-dos, in progress, reviewing, rejected, and approved, right? So which is why I chose this design, this layout, even if it's, how do I say this, even if the problem previously has been fixed. And also just ignore this stuffs here, because these are for the keyboard navigation. As you can see, if I click tab, I'm clicking tab now, it now goes inside the element container, and if I click the arrow keys, I can navigate to different containers there. That's the purpose of this directives here. Anyways, now we will move on to continue implementing the designs. Also, as you notice here, there is an activity feed, right? As well in our, it's also present in our, how do you call this? Not prototype. It's present as well in this UI here. Now I am thinking that I'll eliminate this, and how do I call this? I'll remove this for now. I won't include it in the feature scope. Although I plan to add a notification system in this app, an activity feed would require an event log, right? I can simplify the notification so that it has only a recipient and a sender. And then when you click on a button, that then gets sent into the database, which is then read for the user in the UI and displayed that there is a notification. And inside that notification payload, we can also include a read data, which is a boolean, which will say true or false. If it's true, then the notification will display it as red. If it's false, then it will pop up a badge. So that's what I am thinking, because if I include the activity feed here, then there would be a need for an event log, and for an event log to exist, I will need a worker that will observe this event log, and then depending on the kinds of event, it will then trigger appropriate actions, which will then create the documents or the data needed for it to be perceived in the UI. So the scope, complexity, as well as the size of scope is getting bigger, right, if we include the activity feed. And for this version of the app, for how early it is, my plan is just to remove this for now. We can technically do it, however, it's too much of a resource drain, right, without really giving much of, how do I say this, impact. It's much more of a quality of life improvement rather than a necessity of the workflow, right? Because even then you can see the task, right? So I'll remove this for now. This won't be supported for this version as well as the upcoming ones until, yeah, I think I won't add it. By the way, TaskGate is a portfolio project of mine, and it's not a, how do I call this, a consumer app, right? So that's why I'm cutting scope very much strictly here. And now I need to, there should be an error about importing something that doesn't exist here. This is the project details. We'll go to the TypeScript file for this and remove this one here. This import there. We will also delete that feed, that component, this one here. We will delete this entire component here. You won't need that for in the near future. Just like so. So in this, we will just have a project title, we will have the status badge, we will have the deadline pressure, we will also have the project description, the various metadata like the project owner, the start date, the deadline, progress, and as well as, you know, the velocity as well. I'll cut it. I'll remove that. What's this? Overview. Project details overview. Project overview. Cut that. I'll remove that one. This one here, because it would require a complex algorithm. Well, not really technically complex, however it has a lot of variables involved, because for the velocity to work, we need to have the start date and end date of each task, as well as a record. As then we will compute the average based on the timeline, right? For example, if it's a week, and then we will compute the velocity then. However, the question is, when you apply a timeline, then if it's a week, what if the project is only 3 days, right? So the week won't be, how do I say this, won't be valid. And so to make that valid, I will then have to calculate the duration and base that max there. However, if you have a longer timeline, let's say it's months, then if you support days and weeks and months, then wouldn't it be, how do I call this, logical to make the user select it as well? So these kinds of problems explodes the complexity of the simple feature that we want, right? Just for a velocity, we'll then have to deal with this multiple, how do I call this, multiple variables to make it possible, right? Because it could technically work, but is it accurate or is it valid for the workflow? That's the question, right? So I'll remove that for now. The overdue here is easy because we have already the deadline for the project. We also have the deadline for the task there. And so if the task is not yet completed within the date of the deadline, because as you can see here, let me show the task model. In the task model here, we have a deadline, right? And then this deadline here will determine if the task has already been, how do I call this, has already been the task will be due on this deadline. So as I can also see here, we are lacking quite a data here, one very specific data, which is the completion date, right? We have a task status here which will say it's approved. However, we won't know when it is approved. we could look at the review model here, which contains the close date. However, this would require two databases calls. No, not really two, but for the first progression, it will make two calls. One is for this task data here. The second is for all the review models, right? And then we will then look at the latest entry, the latest close date, which we will then use for the task, right? So I think we won't also support this feature here. I think it's too much trouble. I mean, not trouble, but rather it's too complex for the value it brings, right? Although it's necessary, but because here's the thing, if I make that feature possible, I mean feature present, existing in the UI, being functional, then I would either have to do the calls that I mentioned earlier, which would first read this task, and then since it doesn't have one, I will then go and query all of the reviews associated with this task, and then look at the latest close date that there is. And also we will have to first determine what's the status of this task here. I know, right? I am making this more complicated than it should be. If we need an overdue, then we only need to know that this task is not done yet, right? And this date has already passed, right? That's the only thing that we need to do. We need to look at the status. If the status is not approved here, if it is to do in progress, reviewing, or rejected, if it is still in that phase, unless it is approved, then it is counted as overdue. If this deadline here is already past the current date for when it is read, right? So yeah, we can do that way. We only need to look at the datas that are not yet approved and sum them up for us to show the overdue, how many tasks are overdue, right? We need to look at the task status, look at the deadline, and then look at the current date and report it here. Or we can just pull it all in an array, then we can get its length, which will then report here as how many tasks are overdue, right? So we can do that. Let's do that. Let's get a project overview here. I'll get the project details because this contains the data. You're already here. This contains all data of the project. As we can see here, the project is here. The task, did I get the task here? No, I don't think I have the task. However, we have the task facade, so we should have all the task. This one here, the task states. We could rename this to be just task. Before that, let me verify how Z handles the symbol, how do you call this? symbol, how it handles the rename, because I don't want to accidentally rename everything that is the same instead of just those symbols that represent the, how do I call this, the specific function. Let me check it for a while. How does Z resolve its rename symbol? Does it scope it to the specific symbol used, or to the same names instead? It delegates the rename symbol to the active language server protocol for the language you're editing. The important distinction is that LSP rename is symbol-based, not text-based. How it works: when you invoke rename, Z determines the cursor position. It sends an LSP text document or rename request containing the file URI, the exact line, column, the new name. The language server resolves the symbol at that location, performs semantic analysis, returns every location that refers to that symbol. Z applies the return edits. So the rename is scoped to the resolved symbol, not to the identifiers with the same spelling. Let's test that first, because this one here has too many dependencies and I don't want to break it. Let's say this is a test function here that has a void, just a test1 that we will call inside this. We have it in the task facade, right? Let's bring it to the project facade as well. And then we have the task facade here. We will call that here. Let's say test function. We'll make it the same just to look at how this will resolve, if it's truly by symbol or by name here. Just like so. Now I will rename this here into test function 2 and let's see what happens. Alright, so the rename is truly using the symbol base. You know, these kinds of things I like to test because it's hard to undo a symbol rename, right? If it renamed all the same name, then it's quite a disaster for me to trace back all those dependencies and correct it, stuff like that. And also because the structure of this code the structure of this code allows the developer to focus only on the local parts, right? And so if the rename broke that assumption, then a lot of a lot of symbols will be renamed, and now you have to go all over the place for things that you are not currently working on. And that's right. Now it's done. We have renamed it, and it's very, how do I call this? It's time consuming as well as mentally consuming, mentally draining, because now you are forced into a situation where you have to know the information that you don't need, right? Anyway, we will implement the overdue here. The task overview has the overdue, right? And for the task facade, we'll get this task here. Now I need the project facade to communicate with the task facade. I'll create here a get overdue task. I'll get that here, and then this should be I'm expecting an array of tasks here or a null. And then this get overdue task, all it needs to do is first it needs to look at the tasks that are available. Now why am I doing this is because I know that this task here, I can guarantee that it will only send the task for the following project. I can show you that guarantee here. This listen to task here, as you can see, it receives a project ID as its parameter, and it returns an observable of tasks. Now this project ID is used in the query itself to the database, right? We query the task collection, and then we say that where the project ID data of this task here should equal to the project ID. And so we know that this guarantees that the task that is being sent are those that belongs to a specific project, that is the current one, because the ID that we can get is also based on the URL of the browser. That's also the guarantee that we have. So we know that this will return the task for the specific project, which is why we don't need any parameters here. These are assumptions and invariants that are encoded inside the database, not the database, that are enforced by how the code is structured as well and how it operates. So we now need to get all the tasks inside this task facade task, right? We'll read all of those, and then after reading that, we now get either a task. That's, as you can see here, we'll either get a task array or a null, and then we will have to enforce we will have to first guard if it's a null, if we don't get anything here. Now the null here is, there is only one case that will result in a null. No, there are two cases. First is that the call didn't succeed, so there was a null. And the second is that the first call didn't succeed, so the initial state, which is a null, is what is being sent. And the second state is that if the call succeed but an error occurred, I returned a null there. The error should be handled, right? But for now, I just return a null instead. So we can say that if task, not task here, we should also return, because we don't have any, we will just return a null. We don't have any data to deal with, right? So it's not really, how do I call this? It's not really, we don't have any data to deal with, so there's no point in continuing. Now we will return the tasks dot filter, because we will put in a new array the task that doesn't have task that status is not equal to approved. Before that, let me actually put it in a constant here. not approved, task not approved, because we will still, oh no, we can, let's first get the current date, right? Const current date equals new date, and we will say that we will also get the no, let's just do that. We'll then get the, we will return the task status, which are not equals approved, and then we will say, and for those that are not approved, give me those that has task deadline which is greater than current date. Task that deadline which is greater than current date. Task status. First, we will filter the task status that is equal to approved, and those that has, oh, we will say task deadline is possibly null. It is possible for it to be null. Now I need a way to check this out. Task deadline here. I could try and make a, let me drink water first. I could try and make this a, how do you call that, the question mark colon, what's the name of that, I forgot. I'll say the task deadline. If yes, give me the task that deadline that is greater than current date. If not, just no, this is, let's simplify first. Let's create two filters here just so we don't combine the complexities here. Task not approved. I'll simplify this later after we finished the complete mental model for this task. I'll say first, let's get the task whose status is not equal approved here. Let's get that for now. And then the second is to get the task overviews. Tasks that filter. Now we filtered for the tasks that have not been approved. Next, we will filter for those tasks with deadline. We'll filter for that. We'll get the task. Oh no, not the task. We won't get it from this array, but for the tasks not approved, we'll get those that has a task that deadline. After we get those that have not been approved, I am thinking that approve should have a no. First, we need to check if the task that we are getting has a deadline. because there's no point in comparing something that doesn't have a deadline, right? So we say task that with deadline, task deadline, and we can simplify here. For those that has a task deadline and task that status is not equal approved. Task possible overdue, task with deadline, and not approved. And then we will then compare cons overdues, task overdue. We will then get this and then filter for those tasks whose deadline, because we know that this task here have deadline now. Actually, we can just put it here. Task deadline and task that deadline is greater than current date, and task that status is not equal approved, right? And then that's what we need, so we can just return this directly. I am expecting here return task that filter. Why is it only returning a single task here? Filter should return an array, right? It should return a task array. So why is this saying that there's only one task here? Cannot find name task. Oh, yes, there's no task. There's no tasks with an S. There's only a task with a K. There's no S after that. So that's that. We now get the array here, right? So then let me console log. Can I do that? No. Let me first say return. No, it's const result, and then we'll console log the result. Console log the result there, and then we will, after that, we will return the result. Alright, let's call this project facade that overdue task. Let's call this right here private. We'll call it here inside the constructor here. I want to see constructor. This should be I'll make this I'll have an effect here so that we can run it after the data arrives, because this is a signal, right? Cons the tasks, this one here, this task here is a signal because it's a computed. So we want this to rerun when there is already data inside this task here. Const task equals, this here is just for it to rerun, which is why I am putting it here, because the effect will look at the dependencies, and then if that data changes, it will then rerun. We won't really need the task here, but for it to rerun, we'll just put it there. We'll also log those, and then we'll then get the overdue task here. Let's call that. Now we can see that the overdue task, this one here, has returned a length of 0, which is false because status, alright, it's correct because these two here don't have a deadline. I could verify that. However, this would need me to fix first this one. As you can see here, these are not clicking. No, actually, we can just get this ID here. I'll get this ID here. This one, I'll get this one. And I will directly enter it. Cannot match route because it's just a task with no S. URL segment. Why is that breaking here? Let me check the route. What's the assumptions in the routes here? The route for the tasks. Oh, so it should be no, this should just be a task, right? Should have a task, and then inside the task here there should be an ID. So this should be valid. Right. We can then edit the deadline here. Let's put it on a very far date because I don't know the deadline of the project. Now we have that. We can then return to the project. And now we can see that alright, I forgot that the one I edited is already approved, which is not included in the filter. I edited the wrong task here. Let me copy that. Let me put this to a much far date, just so we can see that it's overdue. Now, why is it still deadline? Still not. Storage was provided. Something is wrong. Let me verify what this warning is, so that we can be aware of the next concrete step we'll take. What does this warning mean in Firestore. The warning is generally not a Firestore warning. It's a browser privacy warning related to Firebase authentication. What's happening? When you initialize Firebase auth, it creates a hidden iframe. The iframe is used for things since your app is running on localhost. The iframe is hosted. The browser considers it a third-party iframe. Modern browsers, Firefox in particular, calls this dynamic state partitioning. Instead of allowing the iframe to freely access cookies or storage, Firefox gives it partition storage. Is this an error? Usually no. It is an informational warning telling you that the browser has isolated that iframe's storage. And then, where is it? Isolated that storage. If authentication works, login works, persistence works, then you can safely ignore it. So it isn't a problem then. However, the data is not pushing through, so we'll have to check. Perhaps a broken pipe has been made after the changes that I created. So this should be in the task details here. When I edit things, it should be inside the task details TypeScript file. When I edit the thing, open edit dialog, this should try this, and it should update it, right? Let me check Firestore to verify if the data has been pushed there. So we can pinpoint where the failure is. This is an idea of RFK. The deadline is still not. Let me add a logging when editing a file, because otherwise I won't know if it succeed. Let's have a console.log here that says, oh, you know what? Maybe the problem was that I didn't connect the, how do I say this, the input for that specific dialog. Where's the HTML file here? We have the project start date. We also have a project deadline here and form control name of deadline. We have that form control name. Form control name of deadline, and on send we are sending all the raw values here. Let me check first. What's the difference between the raw value and the normal just value things here? What is the difference in Angular get raw value versus value? The core difference between value and get raw value in Angular reactive forms is how they handle disabled form controls. Alright, let's change this to get value, that value, just like so. So now we verified that this project deadline here has a form control name which is connected to this form and is being sent here, right? So we'll go back to our task details and look at our try catch here and say that if it's a success, tell me so. Console log success. Task edit was successful. Just so we have reference if the connection was established. No, it's blank here. So this save button is not working, right? The math dialog close is not even working then. When the active task equals, if not active task return, what is this active task here? Task facade active task. The active task in task facade is the computed, that is undefined task ID. This is the source service that get task by ID. So this one here, this is a signal as well. So it is a computed IC. Because we return, but before that, let me actually check if there is an active task present here, because otherwise any changes that we made is pointless. If we can't verify, we can first tell if it's present. Effect, we'll say active task. No, let's say console log this that active task here, right? It's undefined here. So this one has no data, which is why, where is it? Which is why this one here, this where's the edit dialog? This edit dialog here. Project details, was it? No, it's task details. This edit dialog here, I made it so that if the task is not, it's falsy value, if it's undefined or null or false or anything that is falsy, it should return, which is why we weren't able to update the task data. As you can see here, it is undefined, which is why when the active task data is undefined, it's a falsy value, then this return, and we don't even get to see this console log that we have here. So to fix that issue, we will need first to look at the task facade here and determine if this even returns a data here. For that, I would have to no, we know that the store service didn't return anything, right? Let me check the store service and look at this specific get task by ID here. Get task by ID, it receives a parameter of task ID, which is a string, and then sends a computed. Before that, it takes a const task, this that task, is the task. The task here is a to signal, which is a switch map. Oh, no wonder it broke, because this one here, I don't think that's present anymore. So why is this not giving an error? Do I still have that? Oh, this one. Listen to task here. Project ID. Right. This is the store service. The task facade is relying on the store service. Okay, so this is the correct pipeline. However, where did it broke? Oh, I think it, no, get task by ID. When you call this, it will renew itself, right? If not task, it will return. So this is a string undefined. If it's not, if the task doesn't exist, it will return. And then if it is, it will find the task with a task ID equals to task ID. That is what it should return, right? However, it doesn't do that. So let's first check what is inside of this. Let's add lagging here. Effect. We're using an effect because the call returns a signal, and then we will need the task ID. So to get that task ID here, we will first, we need to, we can just pass. Let's hard code pass this ID here. Get task by ID should it should have this. Oops. Why is that the case? It should have this ID here. And we will say const result, and then we will console log that. Const result, let's call it. It's both undefined. The first is that the initial state is undefined. The second is that there's no data to retrieve. Why is that the case? This the task. Let me check if we also have a task here. I think we do. Console.log this net task. No, we don't have any task as well. Why is this the case here? The task relies on the project ID. Oh, because the project ID is no longer in the parameter, in the, how do I call this, the browser URL, right? The invariant this change that I made relied on was that, let me show a diagram that we made a few streams back so we can understand this, what I am talking here. So as you can see, let me go there. We have discussed how we will implement the multi-pane layout, right? Where instead of this here, where every route depends, no, every route showcases one component screen at a time. This one here doesn't work once you introduce a multi-pane layout, right? Because there are different screens at the same time. And so for this, instead of relying on the parameters here for the for each route to contain a specific task without dependencies of the previous one, that no longer applies to this new design that we will be implementing, where each of this route now is linked. Before we can do a project and then we say project ID, right? And then we can also say task here, task, and it will be a task ID. That's possible in this one here because it only shows one screen at a time, so it doesn't need previous data. However, this one here in the multi-pane layout is different because this now needs the previous data, just like so. It needs to have it needs to be nested because the layout shell, the purpose of this is to read the routes here and tell the condition layout here which of the datas are available, for example. But before that, before telling them, the layout shell will also receive data from this breakpoint observer here. This breakpoint observer will then tell the layout shell if the screen is a mobile, is a tablet, or a desktop, or a specific size, right? Within a specific range, we determine if it's a mobile, and then the layout shell will then use this mobile layout shell here, which will function the same as the one at the top here, which shows one screen at a time per route. That's for the mobile. Now for the tablet and above, once this breakpoint observer tells the layout shell and the parameters and the range for the tablet and above is true, then it will use this layout shell here, which is dedicated for tablet and above, to perform the multi-pane layout. And then in the if condition, it's just the same with this at the top here, the previous one, where we check for the route state, for the route state, and then determine which of these components will be shown. However, and this also needs the this nesting routes, so that we have the previous data and the and the child of it, because we will use the same route for the tablet and above. As you can see here in the tablet and above layout shell, we have the component and another component. This represents these two panes here. The shell layout here is this one, condition layout shell for the tablet and above, and this component screen here represents these two components here. We have an if condition in this component because there are designs we have that only utilizes one screen, and we also have designs that utilizes both screens here. And so this is why the old assumption broke, because before we don't need the previous data, right? We just need the current, what are you looking at, and the document to be, and the data that to be rendered, right? However, for the multi-pane layout to work, we'll have to put the previous data, the parent data, as well as the child data, so that we can still access this data here, and the dependencies, the relationships of those queries still work. So that's the That's the assumption and the invariant that we will be enforcing, the guarantees that we will rely on. Because in this layout, in this structure, each route is nested. The parent is present, the children's are present, and each successive elements are present. Now, I haven't considered yet here if it will hit a browser limit in the URL, but for now, let's just ignore that problem and make this work. Because if that browser limit is hit, then we still have some ways to resolve it. I'll show it here. I'll explain what alternative we can do to solve that issue if we encounter it. So in our design here, as you can see, for the multi-pane layout, we are pairing things up. Excuse me. We are pairing things up, right? So the theme list is paired with the theme details, right? And we also have this one here, the project details is paired with the task list here. And if ever the URL length becomes a problem, we can no longer nest things as we want. We can then solve it by only nesting the pairings that we have here, because these are the only things that will exist at the same time on the screen, right? That is why also I limit the support for this responsive design to only be 1280 pixels, because more than that, then a third pane layout will be valid, and then this assumption will break now. And so you might be wondering, why aren't you just solving it then by designing so that a third pane is possible? The problem is that when a third pane is possible, let's say if a project title and a to-do, what will be the third pane? What will it contain? Would you say that it should be a task title? Then if it is a task title, the reviews would no longer fit on the same view, right? And it will be on another view, which doesn't really make sense, because the purpose of this layout here is for the reviews to be accessible immediately for the task details, because they are linked together, they belong together, and they matter. The context only matters once they are together. If the review is out of this relationship of this pairing, then let's say task title is not present and review here becomes a solo view. If I could just remove this. This one here. If this becomes a solo view of its own here, then it no longer makes sense, right? Because the next one here will be this review title and the discussion. No, it still makes sense. However, the problem is that when you are already in review, what if you want to view another task? Now you have to go back and no, what if you need to edit the task? Now you need to go back and edit the task, and then go to check the review again to check the reviews, and then you select a review, you go to this details here and the discussion, right? So there are unintuitive pairings that is not really, how do you call this? It doesn't logically pair up, because in this workflow, for instance, if it's a 2-pane, we can confidently say that here, if you select a project title, if you select a project here, you click this one, then you are directed to this project details, right? And the project details, when you click on a task board here, if you click that, it will then turn into a multi-pane, which will show the list of tasks inside this category here. So that makes sense, right? This pairing makes sense because if you want to view the elements inside this category, it only makes sense to view it beside the category rather than on another screen, right? Because then it will be jumping all over the place. And then after you view that, you have the list and you click on the details, you then go to this here where you can view the task details, right? And if you click the review list, it will then show up the reviews here, which makes sense because the reviews belong to the task, right? And seeing the reviews beside the task is reasonable, or is what we expected, because we want to see why this task progress here is rejected, right? Or why is it approved? So we have the list here that we can view which review was approved, which was rejected. And so when you click on a review, you will then go to this review details here that shows the details of the reviews. It also has a button that shows the comments, which only makes sense inside this context because the comments are for the review and the review owns the comments, right? So if this is on another screen, then it wouldn't make sense, because when you want to go back to the review title, you will have to hit the back. And now if you want to check the discussion again, the comments, you will now have to move to the screen again, which is like, fighting the expected workflow, because we expect these actions to be seamless, right? So that's the reason why I limited it to only support 1280 pixels and not beyond beyond 2 panes. Okay, so that's the reason for the 2 panes, and how we can solve the URL limit if we hit it, if ever that is applicable. Just in case, if it doesn't happen, then we won't have to implement what we just discussed. But if it does happen, we have an alternative that we can work with, which will also be enforced in the code. Now you might be wondering why this kind of things are enforced, are being encoded inside the code itself. Why not make it much more flexible for it to be easy to change and stuff like that? The problem of it being easy to change is that it's also easy to break. I mean, if it doesn't look wrong, you won't know it's wrong, right? So it's much better for it to scream that something is wrong than for it to run normally and something is wrong, right? That's a dangerous bug we want to avoid. So that is why we are hard coding the assumptions. We are explicitly enforcing the invariants, the guarantees that we have in our head into the code, so that anyone who might, or even the owner in the future, will know why something broke, or if an assumption was violated, if an invariant was violated, which is why we are hard coding these guarantees here, and why we are strictly limiting the amount of flexibility that can be done, because too much flexibility is, there's a saying that goes, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Now, back to the code where it broke because there is no longer how do you call this? No longer a project ID. This would require a fix inside the routers itself. The routes will now need to be reconfigured for it to work with the intended design that we have. For now, I'll do this as a pairing, where first, now this change will break a lot of things, and that's fine, because we know that those breaking changes will report themselves to us as an error. So if you encounter a lot of errors, you don't really have to be afraid of them. Instead, you have to think about it in another perspective, where you should somehow be happy that an error occurred, because now you know that something is wrong, right? And you can fix. However, if no errors occurred and something is wrong, where do you even start to look things for, right? Then I'll have to add a new route here that will enforce this. And you can also notice that I am using constants here. I prefer that because you know that you won't misspell things, right? Because you only have to select. Otherwise, if you hard-coded the strings here, then it's easy to, misspell the routes or whatever it is. So it's much better if you, for these kinds of things where they are constant, they won't change, is to hard code it in the code. I mean, hard code that assumption invariant in the code and say that only select these things here which would not change. Or if ever they change in the future, then it's much easier, because now the things that are depending on it are holding the variable that contains the original data. So once you change the original data, then the dependencies of it will also receive the update, right? So now we have here a route params, which should be this one here, string interpolation, because we are using a slash. Route params, this would be task. Actually, yes, let's fix this after I complete this. After the project, we will also have a project ID here in the middle. As the path receiver. No, it I thought the path would receive a array so that I don't have to make all this squiggly string interpolation here. However, that's not the case, so I'll just have to deal with this. There are two possible implementations that I am currently thinking of, but first let me sit down. One implementation is that to make it a flat list here, it would, how do I call this? It would only, it doesn't change the functionality, but it doesn't really enforce the relationship about owning. No, not owning, nesting the child element. Right? Since we also discussed that the project is paired with task, and so with the task list there, and so we can this is quite a big change, and so to fix the previous error, we will do this temporarily, because I think this should be on another task, right? Because currently we're working on the UI. Now we're touching on the routes and touching on a lot of things, and I think we won't get anything done here if we touch everything at once. So to fix the problem where we get no value, instead is for us to get the data. I know for a fact that the task model, where's the task model? The task model here has the project ID, right? So I'll use that instead to get the tasks and not rely on the current implementation where it reads on a route, because then it wouldn't work, right? No, I think something is missing here. I'm thinking if I should fix the routes that we deferred or do I make a new function to get a snapshot of the data of the task, so that I can get the project ID and then use that information to get the active task. And it's a circular thing, so I think we'll just have to fix the route instead, because then it would be a continuous flow of progress rather than circling and then we'll just have to remove it because it's temporary. So I'll just have to first fix this, no, not fix, but rather, how do you call this, enforce that this should be the layout of the route. And so for that, we also don't need to touch quite a lot of things if we only want one component to work here, because that's the only component we care then. So for that, I'll create a new route path here that we can call after the actually, let me just copy this one because we will edit this, and then I will add a task here, route params inside this squiggly string interpolation, route params task, and then we will get the task ID as well, like so. Task route params, which has a task ID. Now once I change things, this path will break too, because it is using this dependency from the previous assumption of routes that we have before implementing this, and this will break. I could solve that by using a string instead. However, once I do the change, will I be able to remember that there are still strings left there? I don't think so, or maybe I can. However, it's another overhead on the thinking, right? Now we have to worry about if there are more strings in there. So instead, I'll just leave it like this, so that after the change it breaks and we know that it needs to be fixed. And so after that, we have we'll import the details here. For now, this will also change, but this change is not that this change is very obvious, because this will not work on the multi-pane, unlike the task ID where it might work, where it will work, but we forget to change it for future changes. let's say task and get the task details here, and get the task details, and then we'll say task details. This will fix this for now. That should work. Now I'll go back to the task details TypeScript file. Here, because this has the route, this here, we are getting the, as you can see here, we are getting the param map that get, let's say, task, active task, right? Now we'll need also to get the project ID, which should be already available. And also, if you notice here, as you notice here, this is a snapshot, right? In the change that we will be making for the multi-pane layout, this assumption will break because we now need a dynamic route. We now need to read the route dynamically. For that to work, we need to subscribe, which will require for the route to spit out a observable, which we can subscribe and observe dynamically, which would solve the issue for the multi-pane layout. But for now, I'll just leave it like that because I will remove this one, everything that is related to a component for the route. I'll centralize it to the path layout instead, right, and pass those data to the component. And why am I passing it? And instead of just getting the data from, oh no, we can actually create a service that stores the routes, a route store, right? And then the facades will just have to get the data there for it to render. We can do that. For now, let's make this a snapshot, since we will be changing this anyway. Unlike those things in the routes where it's very dangerous because we might forget to change it because it's working already. Project route, that params that ID, project ID here, or it's in empty. Now we have the project ID, which is being relied on for the task here. The task, no, not the task, the store needs this project ID here. And for that, since this is in the task details, we need to make sure the task facade has the necessary method to set the project ID. This one here, that this task is relying, because as you can see, the task is being sent here. Now the project ID is being sent to listen to this task here. So we need to grab the method for this project ID to be set, which is, actually, we don't need to grab that. We can just immediately use it. We'll use it in this constructor here. In this constructor, we have the active task, right? It's in the store. Okay, we have the active task. And then we want this to set the project ID. I am thinking how the data will be passed here. If it's in the task details, then we need a method to call the what do you call this? This one, this set project ID here. However, I am wondering, can the task details instantiate this task facade at its... Oh, it can do that because we called it here. Because services are lazy and they will only run once they are used, otherwise they won't. That's why I am thinking, if the task details is using the task facade here, so excuse me. Excuse me. I am thinking that if the task details won't use this task facade, then this won't instantiate, which would then won't call this one here if I just place it here and immediately call it. However, now this is now calling the task facade, but I still think that next task action, task facade, set task ID. Set task ID. I'm looking for the set task ID in the task facade so that I can see where it is being used here. Set task ID. It's here to set the task ID, which is then set the task ID in the review store. Oh, so this is for another thing. It's not for... Oh, so it's for the review, not for the project. So this isn't being called on for the project. Let me actually create a function here that will do this explicitly, manually, so that we can guarantee that this will run, because otherwise we'll just be depending on the runtime, and I don't know, perhaps there will be a race condition that we aren't aware of, and we are relying on the data to be delivered when we need it, and it's not yet there, and we will see a blank screen instead. So I'll create an explicit function that will instantiate what we need here. We need the store service to call this one here, and there is a filter that says if the project ID is not string, then do not proceed. Otherwise, call this function here, and we will now receive a data. Either that will be a... what will this return? It will return an array of tasks here, whether it has a data or it will be empty. That's what it will do. So now let me call the set project ID. Do I already have that here? No. Let me set project ID that will it will only call no, it will first need to receive the project ID here, and then it will then set the project ID for the store service. Set project ID to that. After setting it, we can now be sure that this project ID will exist, and this call here should succeed, and we should receive the data. Right? So let's set this on the project task details in the task details. Right, in the task details, we have a constructor here that reads the project ID, right? And so we will say that this that task facade. Wait. Right. This is the task facade dot set project ID to the project ID. This the project ID here. Let's say cons if cons project ID equals this the project ID, and then a guard a null check here. If not project ID, will return. We know that this one here should have a project ID, so it will succeed because this is a snapshot and we have the data in the URL. So after that, we have this one. This should call this one here, which would put the project ID here, and we'll call this one. We should have the data now by then. So what I will do instead is I will get this. I'll copy that. I am doing this because as you can see in the category, you can see in the categories here, if I click, nothing happens, right? Because I didn't put the functionality back there. So for now, let's manually traverse that route. Now this should work because we have enforced those guarantees, and let's see. Okay, now it's working. And then we will now edit the task deadline. You see, this is a very far traversal from the original intent, which was just to see the overdue data, right? This is how it usually is when you build things out, or if you are working on a certain feature or a pipeline for just a very small detail. We need to move around the place to enforce it, right? So it is very important in this kind of things that you need to know which features are really important, because each implementation will cost resources, not only physical resources but also time, the mental energy, the cognitive load needed to think how to implement the feature. So you can now edit this. Let's now make it go far back so we can see if the overdue is working. And then I'll save it. Now we can see here, the length is still 0 here. That's a problem because it now has the task here. The task before now has a deadline, right? And the oh no, this should work here. We use this ID here and edited this deadline, and it is not an approve, and this is already past the current date. Now I am thinking the reason this fails is either the current date is wrong or the pipeline is broken. Let me check this implementation here. Task details, where is it? I forgot. This is in the overview. Task facade, I guess. This is in the overview, right? So it should be in the project facade instead. Facade. Here. We will first console log this current date here so that we can see what date this is. The date is this one here. It should be this. This is... Oh, I see. Because this symbol is wrong. I use greater than. If task deadline is greater than current date, so obviously task deadline is less than current date. But we made it greater than, so this filter didn't get anything from it. So now, if we fix this, this should work. Now we can see here in the array that we have one data. So it's not working. Let's remove this console logs here. Where is this console log? You can now remove this whole constructor here. We also have to get rid of the store service console logs. Where is it? 33. It's 43. No wonder. Okay, now we remove that. Let's remove everything here. Don't need this. The task facade 38, we have a task facade 38. This one here, we don't need this constructor anymore. So now it's working, and now we can plug that function in here in the... We can now give that project overdue in the task, how many are overdue for the project. We can now we have to put the get overdue inside this read only state here. That should be a I am thinking if there are any guarantees that this is a synchronous operation. I don't think it is. We need a signal instead. Instead of returning just and get overdue task, we will return a signal here, a computed one, because this task here is a signal, so it should trigger the compute once it changes. I have to return a computed, which should have this result here. Or we will return a null. And now when we read this data here, we'll put it here because if we put it on the template, HTML template, it will trigger the function when it re-renders, and it will be called many times unnecessarily. So we will just have the task overdue number. Let's just make it like that for now. And as you can see, I am expecting to get a number here or a null, because we will be calling cons overdue task equals this dot get overdue task. We will be getting a task array here, or this will be a signal, right? So after getting this, we will also call it. So now we are getting a value of that, which should be a task or a null here. And then we will be taking the length of this overdue task, that length. If not overdue task, return null, else there should be data. So we now have the task overdue number, which we can pass down to this project overview. I'll have to make a request to the parent here, project overview. Not really a request, but to force this parent to need it. To fill it rather. This should be a overdue task count, so this should be a count instead. I'll change the name, which should be a number, and should either be a number or a null here. So now we need to fill that data here. That should be a overdue task count, which we will get from the so we also did a call to the get project progress there, which will make a call always every render. I'll just leave that for now because I know I will be changing these things here for once I move some pieces around and implement the route architecture that we are planning to do, which I already explained. This overdue task will need I didn't get it right. We have the read now here. Let's make his account here, and then we will get this for the project details because we still don't have that one. We'll make a excuse me. I'll make a read only of a overdue task count, task count, which should be a computed that will return a number or a null, and then we will get that from the project facade get overdue, not get overdue task. We will get the oh, actually we are just repeating ourselves here, aren't we? Because we can just do this, right? Get overdue task will return a signal. No, not really. Let's just use the variable that the property that we created there, which is the overdue task count. Nice one. Task overdue count. We'll call that here. And then we will return that overdue task count. Oops. Now it should render. No, we didn't connect it yet. We now move to the project overview, HTML, and then we will put it here. The what's the name of it? This one here. That should work. Now you can see that there's one over there. This one here, there's one, and I'll say one. Before that, let me make this like this. I will create a conditional that says at if overdue task count let me create a variable for this in here so that we don't have to call it always. And then we will do this overdue task count here. We will then say at if overdue task count, we'll also add else here. That would be let's just say 0. No task overdue here. No task overdue. No, that's not accurate because there's no data. So we will say no data available. And then we will if there is a task count, then there is also a we'll also have to check if the overdue task count that length. Why isn't this giving me? This should be, oh, now it's a number. We don't have to get the length anymore. If overdue task count, we will just have, we still need an if statement here. If overdue task count is greater than 2, we will say that overdue task count tasks else overdue task count, which should be a single word, singular version of it. Now we have this one here, overdue of one task. Then if there is another task, let's create a task here. This should be overdue with a deadline of this one here. Right. the overview says 2 tasks, but we want it to be more. We want it to be a plural task here. So the statement overview task count is greater than 2 doesn't include 2, right? So we'll say if it is greater or equal to. Now it shows that there is an S, tasks. So we now have implemented the overview feature. We can now be certain that this feature here will work. However, we cannot be certain if the data won't be broken. And the good thing is that if it does break, we would know, because there is a lot of errors that will come when that happens. Let me first commit some of this. It says remove project activity feed. Will not be using in the near future. Will not be implementing in the near future. Will not implement in the near future. Remove project activity feed. Will not implement in the near future. Okay, let's commit that. Let's start committing some of the changes that I made. We changed the edit product dialog, right, for the overview feature to work, because we need the task details to be edited. We also remove some class. I removed some class there off screen yesterday, and so we also have a change here in the project details. Is it related? No, it isn't related, so we'll not group that with it. Oh no, it is related because we have an overdue task count here, so I'll include that change. Let me actually write this as it moves so that I won't have to track it again. Refactor. This is not the refactor. This is a feature implementation. Feature overdue task. Add feature support for overdue task metric. Added we change the project form for the edit to return a value instead of get raw value. We also removed custom error state, arbitrary error classes for the project form, for the edit project form. This one here should also be edit project form, and then we also add what do you call this, a menu dialog, add a more menu dialog for project details, for project details, and then we also, that's not the dialog though, menu, let's leave it at menu. And then we implement also the add the get project count, add get project progress, project progress. And then what else? Let's change this, remove arbitrary error classes to remove some, just to include those that are not specified in the file, because I know there are still arbitrary error classes for that I haven't changed yet, but I won't dig down right now because I know I will do in the upcoming implementations, because we would be revising the UI, and so I'll have to touch all those UI pieces. Next is we revise the we revise the method for get. We created add a dynamic route listener for project details, add the dynamic route listener for project details, and we also project status signal. We are also overdue task. I am quite unsure where this is being used here. Let's check. Oh, it's in the header, right? Okay. Add a dynamic route listener for project ID. In project details. Next is we add project status. Project status support to project status support to the project details. Well, this is quite a long commit here because I forgot to commit yesterday, and now the changes yesterday and today are meeting. Well, that's fine anyway. We'll just have to specify everything here. Project status, and then we have the I also implemented the overdue task count, task metric, add feature support. Okay, that's recorded, and then we set the project status. We just added there. That's fine. And then we also have the project ID return dialog. Oh, it's in the project details still. Okay. This was affected by the change that we made for the edit dialog, where so that we can use the UI to edit the deadline of the task. Also edited some of the symbols here that was affected because of the right. I changed this yesterday for the effects of the project ID. Changes to the remove some, add more, get project progress, add the dynamic route listener for project ID in project details, and updated dependencies. Next is project overview. Oh, this is where we place the, what do you call this, the task count here. Let's also mention that we removed the, did I mention I removed the velocity? Remove, right, I already mentioned that, so we don't have to mention it here. Then we will, next is the current progress. We already have that. And then the project task board. So this was the change that was made when I explained the layout issue. Next we have the task, computed task facade, the task here. This was the change for the implementation of the new task. But for here we're just getting the task. Let me check if there are other task changes. Oh, we forgot to change this. Let's remove this because we don't need that. Going back at the top, I'll mention also that this one here, task board, UL content. I'll mention also that task has been task board card.ts. Oh, so it's just a propagation for the change update because we changed the name, so everything that depends on it will also change. Next is this overdue count here that we implemented. Did I already record that? Support for overdue tasks metric, that's recorded. Next is a task facade task, get project status, that's already added. Project progress, overdue task, that's done. We have created a route here, add route support for nesting project and task in preparation for the multi-pane layout implementation. Next is the project list. Also, we just removed all the unnecessary errors, right? I'll say also clean up unused task state in the template, in the HTML template files. Next is this task state, that's the cleanup. Okay, next is this project ID param.get. Did I mention that we add a route support? I also mentioned that we added a temporary route support for project ID in task details, just so once I see this commit, I'll know that I'll record, I'll put it in my Obsidian to-dos to remove this or update it in the future, but not for now. Then we have the task here, which is just a propagation of the change that we made. And also added a project ID. Set project ID for just the task to receive. Okay. Add template, project, task facade. Add set project ID in task facade for explicit manual initialization for the task query in the repo, in the Firestore repo. Next is we have the math card for the task sort. I just removed I just clean up the task status, so that's already done. And then we have the task state here, which should be renamed though. Let's rename this to task, just like so. For this, rename task state task state to task to follow how should I say this, to remind to no it should be to how should I say this, what do you call it when you needed to poke the person to know it is this what it should be done. Rename task state to task to align its new capability. Next is the material theme here. We add support to label text for math error state class. Okay, I think that's all the changes that we made here. It's quite a long list. Now you might be wondering why I am being detailed here. That is because so that when I check this commit in the future, I know immediately which change in here, and so that I don't have to read the diff and analyze what changed, especially if it's already quite a long time of a gap and I already forgot how that implementation works. So I won't have the intuition about why, and I need to know in the commit message instead what changed and the intention behind those changes, so that I can immediately track where something breaks or where something needs to be rolled back. So now I'll make this commit here. And then yeah, I think this is a good place to somehow end the stream because it's almost close to 3 hours of streaming here, and I need to take a break as well. And let me recap what we just did so that we can appreciate the work that we've done. So first is that, oh, did I forgot to change the screen while talking in the coding session? Oh, right, I did forget it. Well, there's nothing I can do anymore about that. However, I can still show the commits that we made here. This is where it becomes helpful. So here, let me check if the screen is showing. This was in the activity feed where we remove drop down icon. That was the old layout. And here excuse me, here in the activity feed we remove the files here because we will not be implementing it in the near future. And this here, this says quite a lot, but here we added a commit where we changed the edit project form for the edit to return a value instead of a get row value in here. I checked the difference between the get row value and the value, and it's about the disable button, and I don't want to get the row value of a disable button in here, and so I just change it to value instead. I also removed some arbitrary error classes. Now before I was able to let me show you. Before I was able to create this abstraction here, I'd be able to understand how to create a global class that I can reuse to implement the error state for the for the elements that need it. I was arbitrarily manually overriding each CSS specificity because I didn't know how to change it on that specific element only and not affect the whole, what do you call this, the whole implementation of the specific Angular material, what do you call this, component, because in the API example there are only global overrides, right? And I don't want to do the global overrides. So instead I did my research and found out that there are variables that you can override for each how do you call this, for each component. And so if you put these variables there with a class, then it will have a value and will prefer to use this instead of the default. So that's how I was able to, this is a double here, that's how I was able to that's how I was able to create this global CSS class and why I will now have to remove all those arbitrary classes that not arbitrary classes, but arbitrary, what do you call this, styles and also classes, I guess, that I created before that discovery or improvement. We also did add a more button for the project details, as you can see here, where I click the horizontal more, no, the vertical more button. You can see that it has the edit and delete, This is what I mean by the error state, where I want a specific color just for this component, right? I want the delete to be more prominent, to indicate or to tell the user that this action will need what do you call this? Will need conscious decision. And then we have the get project progress. We added this functionality for this progress bar here above the overdue inside the project details card here. We added the get project progress to dynamically calculate the progress for the specific task, for the specific project. Now the get project progress here is rather excuse me, give me a moment. The get project progress here, the algorithm uses fairly simplified. Let me show you what I mean by that. Project, where is it? Get project status. Let me find. Get project status. I think I have it in the project facade. Here, I have it here. In the get project status, no, that's not what I meant. I need the progress. We're talking about the project progress. The get project progress here. We first get the task list, and then we get the total the total length, how many tasks are there in the project, and then we filtered for those tasks that has been approved, because the approved state is the final state of the workflow. Once it is approved, it is synonymous to being completed. And then in the current, we also get the current progress here by dividing how many tasks are done to how many tasks are present. So we are just getting the ratio of that, and then we multiply it by 100 so that we can get the whole number. So we just return it. That's how the algorithm for this progress bar here works. Next is that we add a route support for the nesting project and task in preparation for the multi-pane layout implementation. This is where we let me show you. This is where we project routes. This where we added a special route to allow us to get the project ID in the route, and also this is also how it would look like in the implementation of the multi-pane layout of the pair by pair how do you call this, pair by pair panes. However, the difference is that in here we are loading a component that is different, right? We are replacing the screen. In the implementation that we will be doing in the future for this multi-pane layout, we will instead make the route to hold just the state and not be the navigation of the app, because that will be handled by the shell layout. Next is we added the route support. Then we clean up unused task state. This task state is the, how do you call this, debris or the leftover pieces of code that are no longer in use because we have changed the architecture, we have revised the invariant. And so the also I mentioned in here where I would be making a dedicated class instead for the loading and success and error for the await functions, which is why we remove the task state here. We will be replacing it with a dedicated class in the future to simplify, or rather to make the handling of those UI indications to be much more simple, in a way that we don't have to think anymore how to do it. We just need to instantiate the class and then read the state of that specific class. Then we can show to the UI what is happening. Next is this add temporary route support for project ID and task details. This is just a reminder for me to remove the snapshot implementation of the route reading and task details, for us to be able to edit the task deadline in the task details, so that we can verify the overdue task if it is working, and also to trace the disconnect on why there is a null or undefined in the data pipe where we expected there to be a data. So that's what we did there. And we also added a set project ID in task facade because we want the initialization to be explicit, so we have to do it manually instead of relying on the framework to call it for us, because we won't know how it will be handled or how it will be sequenced, and we might need the data, and we will need the data before anything else is rendered on the screen, before the final view comes in, so that by the time the data is ready, it enters the view immediately and it will be presented, rather than a blank, rather than having no data at all. Then we rename the task state to task here. This is just to align the new capability. And then we also add support to label tasks for math error state there. And so yeah, that's all that we did today. The next UIs from Figma, we will be implementing it on the next streams. And also, as you may have noticed, the progress visible is not that much, right? We only finished just one screen right now. However, as you also noticed that a lot of work is done behind the scenes, or rather a lot of considerations, a lot of thinking that is not visible to the UI, but is essential in how the UI works, or how the guarantees or the expectation of the user is fulfilled. So that's that, and I'll make so I already did the recap there about the objectives of the stream, of how we of what we did today. We explained the workaround for the layout constraint problem that I mentioned, about the CSS layout problem, about the constraints of the parent inheriting the intrinsic value or intrinsic width of the children rather than enforcing the one of the parent. And I showed you the workaround that I thought of, which was to let me show you here. This one, oops, which was to limit the container to a much less viewport width, and then just center it around. And as you notice, even though we solved this problem excuse me, we didn't implement it, or rather we didn't choose to keep it, because it isn't an intuitive layout, or isn't an intuitive design where the user can immediately know what to do once they see it or what to expect, right? And so we also continued to implement the UI design from Figma, and we finished some features. We made features working, such as the progress bar, let me show you the progress bar. Here we also made the overdue work, and then we also made this we also made this cards here for the categories to be dynamic and read the real data to show that there are 2 to those here, 0 in progress, and so on, just so it looks you know a lot just from a glance, right? That's the purpose of this design here, and also why I chose this implementation, so that the user can see, oh, there are 2 to do's left, or now we don't have any in progress, or there is 1 task that is approved, without really checking the category itself just from a glance, right? And so we also already talked about what we did and using the commit, and also why I make my commits very detailed. We also witnessed how useful it is when I use it to do the recap, because just by reading it, I know immediately what we have done. And so yeah, I'll be ending the stream now, and thank you everyone for staying. And also, you can, if you want, you can join the Discord. I am building a community there. The Discord link is in the bottom left corner of the screen, and it is also in the description. And if you enjoy and want to be updated, or you want to follow up, or you just want to support me, you can click the subscribe, the like, and if you want, you can share this too. And also, yeah, in the Discord server, I'll be posting their announcement and also devlogs and stuff like that. So if you're interested, you can join there as well. So that's all for today, and thank you everyone for watching, if you made it this far. And yeah, we will be implementing the rest of the UI in the following streams, so stay tuned. Thank you very much again.